Please listen carefully.
Hello and welcome to another video, another Living with Leaf video. This one's going to be a year in review video, having owned Leaf for 1 year now, just over 1 year, a year and a few days. I just want to talk about the experiences I've had. Now I've driven it 4 seasons in all kind of weathers, including lovely weather like today. Yeah, it's pretty much like this in November last year, I think. Funny that. So I just want to talk a little bit about what my experiences are, good and bad. Those of you who've stuck with the videos, who've seen the previous videos, will have a reasonable idea of how things have been. But now I've had it for all 4 seasons. It would be good to just talk a little bit about it generally, and also importantly, put together some facts and figures. I'm going to come on to those later on. But I can briefly outline a few things to start with. So first of all, dealing with mechanical issues I've had with the car. It hasn't been totally smooth riding, but nor has it been all that bad. I've had a couple of issues which I've documented earlier in earlier videos. One was the first one was a Grabby brakes issue. That was the one that was particularly annoying because it was present all the time, and that was just a case of a software update to fix it, which the dealer did. The dealership did free of charge. That was to stop when I was coming to a complete stop. It was impossible to ease off the brake and have a gentle stop. It was always quite a marked sudden stop at the end of the braking. Normally you would brake relatively hard to begin with and then ease off the brake as you come to a complete stop. Well, that wasn't the case. That's how normal brakes work. That wasn't the case. Anyway, yes, the software update fixed that, and I was glad of that. Then the other issue I had was the rattle down at the side here, which was to do with the suspension. That was fixed, also under warranty, so no charge to me. That's documented in a previous video, so take a look at that if you want to know about that in detail. So those are the 2 issues I've had with the car. I haven't had any other issues to speak of, no mechanical issues, and as I say, those were fixed under warranty. No big deal. One was a software update, the other one was mechanical. May have always been like that I had noticed the rattle, but thought it was actually something in the car initially inside. It took me a while to realise it was something wrong with the car. But it didn't. Neither of those issues affected the safety or the handling of the car. Just the ride really with the braking. So the costs, in terms of costs for the year, well, I'm going to break down the full fuel costs later, full energy costs I should say. But in terms of other costs I had to pay, I had servicing costs. So I had a big service, which by the book is £130. I did actually pay more for mine just because of the dealership where I went to. I didn't really shop around. I just went to one that was handy, which is near to me. So it was only subsequent to that I shopped around a little bit to find who were the best in terms of price. And for the service I had, which was quite a major one, really. It was instead of £130 the book price, I paid £225. So quite a bit more, but much less than I've paid in the past for conventional car services. And obviously with an electric car, there's far fewer things to examine, things that could potentially go wrong. So They're relatively straightforward. It's mainly a diagnostics type service. And the other expense, the other major outlay I've had was one that might strike a lot of other electric car drivers as slightly odd, but one of the key things about an electric car is you want to preserve as much energy as you can, and one of the factors there is tyres. So having the tyres at the correct pressure and having tyres in good condition. And what I decided to do for the first time ever, having had enough of driving on normal tyres in winter, I decided to do what most sensible people in continental Europe do, and I got some winter tyres for the first time. So yeah, that would strike a lot of electric car drivers as slightly odd, but well, they proved their worth, because we, having embarked on a trip up to family up in northeast Lincolnshire, when we came back the motorway road. It was snowing. We came back the motorway route because of the snow, rather than our normal route, and we pulled in our services on the M1, and there were cars sliding all over the place. It was covered in snow, and we had absolutely no issues whatsoever. So I was really glad I'd got those winter tyres, and the rest of the time, obviously, any ice on the road, far nicer driving with those on the car. So really pleased with that purchase, but it wasn't cheap. They came to £420 in total, so £105 a tyre. Which, okay, you know, it's a lot of money, but the tyres aren't going to wear out any faster because they're swapped over, obviously. So for while the winter tyres are on the car, the summer tyres aren't on the car, and they aren't having any wear and tear. So it's just the initial outlay. Haven't stretched to buying separate wheels. I don't think I'd do that. That would be very expensive. So no, not quite that flush. So that was the other big expense, really. In terms of how I've been charging the car, well, most of that charging has been done at home, domestic charging. Now, I did start the first few months. I took the view that because we had solar panels on our roof at home, we haven't got many. We've got 8, so not a huge amount, but you know, it's okay. It's okay. I decided that, you know, I would use the solar PV energy to charge the car during the daytime. But unfortunately, the car requires a bit more energy than those panels will generate. Now, those panels are fine generating electricity for me. I work at home, so if I'm at home on my own, normal day-to-day, you know, work stuff, those solar panels are more than adequate to power all the electricity I'm using, and a lot more besides. You know, we're not using all of that energy. So it may be at some point we look at some kind of power storage system, and there are. Obviously, the Tesla Powerwall is the one that's hit the headlines, but there are alternatives. Ecotricity have talked about bringing out a black box. In fact, I heard about that before I'd heard about the Tesla Powerwall, but that might be something we consider. But yeah, it reached a certain point a few months in where I thought, well, I'm going to look at Economy 7. I know a lot of people do charge electric cars that way, and obviously from a National Grid's point of view, it's better that way, because you're taking demand off the grid from during the daytime and putting it on over night time. It means they can smooth out the curve of demand from National Grid's perspective. But more importantly, from my perspective, our energy costs went, you know, they're under half for the same electricity during the night time, between midnight and 6:30 in the morning. So I think June we swapped over. Since June, I've been charging, like I say, off peak Economy 7 overnight, and that has had a bearing on the energy costs, which I'll come on to later, as I said. In terms of incidents in the car, well, again, there's another video detailing the major incident, the one that most people would worry about driving an electric car, i.e. I didn't actually run out of electricity, but I came close to running out of electricity, and the circumstances really required that I called a flatbed. Now, as I detailed in that other video, which you can see on my channel, there were 3 things that went wrong really there that wouldn't ordinarily happen. One of them was down to my poor planning, so you know, it is what it is. And the other thing to bear in mind is I didn't break down. I could have plugged in the car, any domestic power point. I could have found a domestic power point, charged the car and carried on my journey. It was just a question of that wasn't convenient. I had my wife and our youngest in the car, and it wasn't really fair on them to make them wait for a long time while we charged. So it wasn't practical. So that's been the only incident. So I've only had one requirement to call recovery vehicle. Coincidentally, my motorbike broke down 2 weeks ago. So you know, it's that broke down a year ago as well. So I haven't had a breakdown in the electric car yet. Internal combustion engines are letting me down sort of every year, I think, really. Once a year something goes twang in an internal combustion engine, and you know, I can't continue my journey. Whereas when I ran out of energy, or came close to running out of electricity in this, I just got flatbed recovered to the nearest rapid charger and continued our journey. We were just delayed, didn't break down. So there's that consideration. And on the issue of flatbed recovery, that is something that apparently I've looked into and contacted Nissan about, and that is of course free of charge. The condition really, that's going to be free of charge indefinitely, I should say, on condition that the Leaf is the car is serviced through Nissan themselves, a Nissan dealership. Which, I mean, where else are you going to go at the moment? Well, at the moment you're not going to go anywhere else. So yeah, that's not a biggie really. Now, coming on to minor gripes. Minor gripes I've had. Well, the first one really is with the car wing system. The for those who haven't seen the other video or aren't aware, the car wings system is the system built into the car, which allows you to remote access the car for charging purposes. So you can use a phone and you know, Android or Apple phone, and you can start charging on the car. You can turn on the climate control. That's really nice. There is a timer built into the car by which you can set things like charging times. So you know, on a nightly basis, it will come on at 12:30 in my case, and you know, and charge until it needs, but up till 6:30 potentially. But also allows you to set up climate control. So if you were commuting at regular times, you could set the car's climate control to come on, say, a quarter of an hour before you left to go to work, and the car will be nicely warm and defrosted. And in the case of this car, the seats warmed up and the steering wheel warmed up. That's very, very posy. Yeah, in terms of that, the car wings issues, those have been remote connectivity issues. They've not been car wings in the car itself, but connectivity issues. And I know lots of people in the community have experienced these problems with system outages, where the phone can't contact the car, and it has been a little bit annoying. It may be in my imagination, but it does seem to have improved a little bit recently. So I know that they moved over to some new servers, so possibly that's been the reason it's slightly more stable than it appeared to be. But we'll see. I'm going to reserve judgment on that. It's been a bit of a pain sometimes when I've wanted to, I might be in bed and thinking, I might suddenly think, oh, actually, I'll charge it up to 100% in the morning, for the morning. And I've gone into the app and tried to do that, and then there's been no connection. So, yeah, that's a minor annoyance. And the other aspect in there, I'd say there's the CarWings app for phones could do with some improvements. There's a third-party one, LEAF I use, which is actually better than the CarWings one. The LEAF one allows you to specify you can actually set a time for it to start charging in the future as a one-off. And the actual main official CarWings app doesn't allow you to do that. It just allows you to turn that on when you need it. But it's nice to be able to schedule that in advance. A few people would say would look at the Tesla and the fact that you can do over-the-air software updates on the Tesla, and probably look enviously at that. Yeah, that would be nice if it were possible to do over-the-air software updates. I mean, technologically, clearly it's possible. There's a cellular connection to the car in terms of CarWings, so what are the ins and outs of that? How much cost would it add to the car? Comparing with a Tesla isn't really fair because Tesla's vastly more expensive. So I don't know really. It's it would be nice, but I can't see that they'd add a huge amount in terms of functionalities of the car. But I don't know. That's another issue really. And the final minor gripe is the navigation system in the car. I don't have a problem with the maps per se. I know some people have had issues with it. I don't know with sat navs whether it's user error or system error. People moan a lot about sat navs. I think they're not very sympathetic to how they work, the logic behind them. They don't think about it. They think about a sat nav in terms of a human being navigating. So they'll say, well, take me to, I don't know, they'll take me from Bristol to Aberdeen, and then when it doesn't take them to where they want to go in Aberdeen, and they've just put Aberdeen in, or they've put Aberdeen as a via point to John O'Groats or something, and it takes them through the city centre in Aberdeen rather than skirting the outsides, which they expect it to do because they're human. Well, that's user ignorance, unfortunately. That's not the system at fault. So I don't know. There are gripes about the system, the navigation system itself. People have in terms of how that works. It's been fine for me, I have to say. I've never had any problems with it in terms of routing. I don't rely on it for charger status. I mean, it supposedly does report charger status. Has access to a network of chargers. It updates those when you switch the car on. But like I say, I don't rely on those, so I can't really comment on them. What I can comment on is the cost of map updates, which are horrifically expensive. Now I know that's not, Nissan don't have a monopoly on that, but it's to ask somebody to pay £140 for a new version of maps is absolutely ludicrous. There's no excuse for that. Ultimately it's an SD card, and it's just taking the proverbial. A lot of us have. Well, a lot of people use their phone now for navigation perfectly well. A lot of them using free navigation apps, which are very good. I personally am familiar with Garmin navigation systems, use them on motorbike, and I like them. I get lifetime map updates with that. I never pay for them, so when I asked the question, can we update the maps, they said yes, that would be £140. My jaw did drop slightly, and I said, well, I'll manage without for now. Which is a shame. You've got the system built into the car. It would be nice to have it up to date working. It only reflects badly on a car company if the maps are bad, because people will say, well, the car's great but the maps are lousy. Well, they will be lousy if they're out of date, and they're not going to be updated unless companies charge a reasonable price for them. So come on, all of you, not just Nissan. I know lots of other car companies charge ludicrous amounts for maps. Sort your act out. Now, for the benefit of those who are considering buying a Leaf, as I say, there'll be some financial figures on it at the end of the video, with a breakdown of my costs over the year. But just talking generally, some of the considerations when you're buying one. Well, if you buy one, the reality of electric cars is people have a perception that batteries are going to be problematic, and that reflects in the resale value of them. So the depreciation of them is quite substantial, and that's something you need to bear in mind. If you're the kind of person that buys a car and sells it on fairly quickly, and you prefer to buy brand new, that's something you'll need to consider. I was aware of that. I decided a long time ago, electric car or normal car, that I wasn't going to buy brand new, because you just take that hit on depreciation. So I decided I'd buy nearly new, which I did in the case of this car. 5,000 miles on the clock when I bought it. As good as new, and it was more than £10,000 less than it would have cost brand new. So that's quite a massive saving. That's quite a significant saving. But main cost of the vehicle aside, there are other considerations you'll have when you're looking at potentially buying a Leaf. One of the things you want to consider is how you charge. How are you going to go about charging? Obviously, the key thing there is, do you have off-road charging? Do you have access to a garage or a driveway off the road where you can have a cable stretched out to the car? In my case, there's a unit. The unit's inside the garage. The cable goes under the garage door to the car, front of the car. So although the unit's weatherproof, it's out of the rain anyway, and that's a luxury I have. Other people around the country, there'll be people living in houses like I used to live in, where you may be in a row of terrace houses and that option isn't available for you. Well, contact your council if you are seriously considering it, because I've heard of quite a few people who've managed to get agreement with the council to run a cable channel or some such across a pavement to the car. Obviously, the only other things you're going to consider there are, wanton vandalism. But I don't know. I mean, ours is, somebody could come up and vandalise ours. They haven't. It's all going to depend on your personal circumstances. The other thing to consider there as well, they can't just unplug the cable when it's plugged into the car. You can lock it, so it can't be unplugged until you actually, flip the switch, as it were, to make it unplug. But I think the other consideration you have to make is how you're going to charge away from home. So, well, in terms of longer journeys, you're only going to use rapid chargers, realistically, I'd say, unless you've got time to stop. The other two, so rapid chargers are sort of standard on a Leaf now. They'll come with a CHAdeMO rapid charger socket, and the other, the level 2 charging, the Menekes charging, that's available on the Leaf at two rates. It's 3.3 kilowatts and 6.6, and they're not exactly 3.3 and 6.6 apparently. The 6.6 is not double the 3.3. But what it does mean is the 6.6 will give you a level 2 charge, so a fast charge, not a rapid charge, a fast charge, quicker than the 3.3 will. So whereas I might have to wait, 4 or 5 hours, somebody with 6.6 would wait, half of that, maybe 3 hours. As I say, that's not particularly relevant if you're doing longer journeys, unless you're parking up somewhere, shopping centre or something like that. Then that may be something you want to consider. It hasn't been an issue for me at all. I just use rapid charges on longer journeys, unless I'm going somewhere, staying at a hotel, in which case I'll find a hotel where they've got a level 2 charger. It charges overnight. It's not been a problem at all. So yeah, the issue you need to bear in mind is a 6.6 rated. That will probably add another £1,000 onto the value of the car from new. So that is something else to consider. And when you're looking second hand, if you can find a 3.3 and you're happy with that, I'd say go for it. The other consideration you get in terms of your battery is whether you buy the battery with the car or you lease the battery. Now, I bought it with the car intentionally. I didn't want to bother with leasing. That's £70 a month costs, which if you're commuting may be worth considering and you're concerned about batteries. But as I say, I wasn't. So if you're looking at buying a Leaf, make sure you check whether it's, the charge rating 3.3 or 6.6 if that bothers you, and also whether the battery, whether you're buying the battery or whether you're leasing it. You've got to be wary of that. Also be wary that I believe most people most people buying second hand would probably want to buy the battery outright. They don't want to be stuck with a battery lease. So if you're buying brand new, that is something you may want to consider. If you're leasing the battery, then you're effectively saying when it comes to reselling it, if you're going to resell it, the buyer will have to take on that battery lease, and they may not be willing to. So, just something to bear in mind. Now, rather a nice, surprising factor of using an electric car is in terms of company mileage. If you're using a personal car for company business and you normally claim mileage, you'd probably be very surprised to hear that you can claim mileage for an electric car. Well, maybe you're not surprised, but you may be surprised to hear that you claim it at the normal rate, the normal fuel rate, which seems quite bizarre because obviously the cost per mile is significantly less to you as an owner. So whether central government will catch up with that eventually, whether the tax people will get their act together, or whether they'll leave it like that as an incentive to get people to, one of the incentives to get people to adopt electric cars, I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll leave it like that. I suppose the flip side of that is, the cost of the car up front is generally more than an ICE car, so maybe you can rationalise it that way. And on that level, in terms of owning an electric car, I know people living in London will be particularly aware of this, living in the outskirts of London, commuting into London, but obviously because there are zero emissions from the car, it's not a hybrid, there are zero emissions, that's a factor where you're driving in emissions-free areas, which are going to be, by all accounts, are going to become more and more common outside the capital. Other cities are seriously considering them. I know Coventry's looking at doing it for a start in terms of places near where I'm based, so that may be a factor in coming times. The infrastructure, I guess that's the biggie. How has that changed over the last year? It's got better. It's got better in terms of reliability. It hasn't. I've got to be careful. I use Ecotricity rapid chargers almost exclusively. I have used other chargers. I've had problems with other chargers. Ecotricity have been generally the most reliable. Certainly recent months I haven't encountered one now for about 3 or 4 months maybe that's been broken. Now there were lots of faults with them for the first few months of my ownership. It was hit or miss really. You could turn up at one and it wasn't working. They've become a lot more reliable, I would say. I know they did a lot of updates to them throughout this year, so maybe that's fixed whatever glitches there were with the systems, but yes, infrastructure has improved in that respect in terms of reliability. I'd like to say it's improved in terms of the number of rapid chargers. I can't honestly say I've personally noticed a massive difference. I've seen the odd few pop up. Bear in mind I'm looking at Ecotricity maps predominantly, and I'm sure there are several other rapid chargers gone up from other companies, but I don't use them, so I'm not really aware of them. I've noticed that a couple of rapid chargers have sprung up in Norfolk since I last looked at Norfolk. Fairly recently they've sprung up. They're not Ecotricity ones though, so they may be levying charges. But Wales still has a dearth of rapid chargers, as does Norfolk really, and Lincolnshire. So all the places I'd like to drive seem to be somewhat lacking in rapid chargers. It's a bit of a pity. Lincolnshire's still only got the one really in Grantham, which is quite poor. You contrast that with Milton Keynes, which has absolutely loads of rapid chargers, not just has loads of normal rated chargers as well, level 2 chargers, but it has tons of rapid chargers. So Milton Keynes is really, really flying the flag for provision of rapid chargers. I'm just going past Donington right now, which is where Formula E is based. Yes, on the subject of electric cars. Yeah, worldwide headquarters of Formula E, just there. And had the joy of going watching the pre-season testing 2 or 3 months ago. Anyway, I think that's enough rabbiting on for now. So get on to the figures.